Oh, wait a second. We're live.
Are we?
I
No.
think so, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So what's been going on with you, Mark?
Oh, I'm just doing everything I can not to face the truth, and that summer is over. I had to take down the swimming pool today, and it was not a happy time. I drained the pool overnight, took it down, and pressure washed everything. Fold it all up. It's all out there drying before I put it on the pallet and cover it all up for the winter.
Hmm.
But it was not an exciting day. So
So,
it's kind of like that acquiescing to, okay, the change of seasons. I gotta get ready for cold weather, and I don't want it.
see, I'm looking forward to whatever cold weather we can get
Yeah,
cuz
yeah.
it's
You're
brutal.
in that hot, humid stuff, and I'm not. So
So we have some people here. We've got Frankie CNC. We've got Harneal Media. Billy Burt's in the house. Who else we
ooh,
got there?
Snow Crusher.
Snow Crusher in the house.
That's right. Hanging out in the chat. Thanks for joining us, y'all. Do appreciate it. You know, we missed something on September 26th, and you would think that I would know this. I mean, I've been all about 50th anniversaries this year because 69 was a huge year, and I can't believe that I missed this. But September 26th was the 50th anniversary of the release of one of my all-time favorite albums. That was Abbey Road by the Beatles.
Oh, nice.
Abbey Road is 50 years old.
That's crazy.
I know, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
like, and I missed it. I didn't get to do any kind of a special talk about it. I didn't get to, bring up any weird, neat, fun facts or anything like that. It just killed me. That's all right. It snuck by. We have acknowledged it.
Well, with the fun, new and exciting technology called internet, we can scatter timelines and shuffle around, anything at this point. So we can always do a Abbey Road one.
We probably could. We could, it would be after the fact, but, hey, what the heck? We,
Gatton's in the house.
Dave Gatton, the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend. Welcome.
So, oh, go ahead.
I just say, welcome aboard, man.
So, what's your favorite track on that album?
Side two. I
Yeah.
don't have a favorite track. I still think that it was one of the best engineered albums out there. Just the way side two just seamlessly flows from beginning to end. I mean, and all of these tunes were recorded at different times in maybe in the same studio, maybe not, but just different people, different times, and then they just blended it together seamlessly, and I really dig it. I
Well,
really dig it. Always have.
they were very resentful, especially John Lennon, of side two of Abbey Road because it was Paul McCartney's idea to stitch together this whole epic sort of song after song and whatnot, like a rock opera, as it were.
Hmm.
And John just wanted to do straight up rock and roll, but they went with Paul's thing because Paul always had the ideas. A lot of people don't consider that,
Yeah.
but historically, these guys, yeah, John Lennon said he became psychedelic before Paul, but Paul was experimenting with sound loops and stuff way before John was doing that. So not to discredit John Lennon was badass, of course, but Paul McCartney was like on it, man.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah. And just that it all blended together so well. Different tempos, different rhythms, different instruments. It all just blended together so well that I think it would have been wrong to release it any other way. It just would not have had the same impact that because I mean, you have the definite track per track on side one. You can put the needle down anywhere on side one and listen to a song and then pick up the needle. But side two, you have to start at the beginning and listen from beginning to end. I mean, I just can't imagine listening to it any other way.
Funny fact about the cover.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't decide on how the cover would be.
Mm-hmm.
And one day they just said, it was time to shoot something, and said, well, we'll just walk across the street and take a picture like that, and that'll be the cover. Because at that point they were feeling the pressures of the logistics side of things, being in a big, famous, powerful rock and roll band, and it was coming to an end, as as we know. So they went out, took a few walks across that Abbey Road, and I don't know whether they called it Abbey Road prior or afterwards, but I do know that they did that. They snapped the picture, the classic one we all know, and it became the cover, which I think, sometimes forcing the creativity is necessary a lot of times, but forcing creativity, sometimes you should go with the flow of what you're doing and not double think yourself. They walked across. It's an iconic image.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think so. And another thing, the way they did that, they were walking with a certain, people read into it. They said it wasn't true, but people read into it. So in that picture of them walking across Abbey Road, and it was from the street across going back to Abbey Road, if you remember.
Right.
You have George Harrison dressed in jeans, and all that. And they said that he resembled, or he was iconic to, it was sort of the what would you call it?
Well, the story I heard at the time, they said it was the Gravedigger.
The Gravedigger.
Are you going? Is that where you were going?
That's exactly where I was going.
Okay, yeah. John Lennon is dressed like a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm trying to remember what they said Ringo was dressed as.
He was the mortuary guy. What's his name? The
Undertaker.
The Undertaker.
Okay. And then Paul being barefoot.
Being the dead guy.
Yeah. I remember that.
Paul said in a subsequent interview, when he was pressed on the issue, he said, people say this, people say that. And I think Paul did that a lot, and still does it a lot. And frankly, he says, sometimes, I run into people, they know our story better than I do, because it's been said so many times. But he said, people, think too much of it. He says, it was a hot day, so I walked across barefoot because it was kind of hot.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you can't really, he tries to create more controversy than.
Right. Well, but that wasn't the only time that had happened. If you remember the cover of the album Help, where they're all standing there with semaphore flags.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask people, well, what is that? The people who know that there is semaphore will tell you, oh, well, they're spelling out help. And that's not what it spells out.
Okay.
That they had them take a photo spelling out the word help in semaphore. But when it came time to do the shot, they said it just didn't look good. It didn't look right. So they decided to go ahead and just, have them hold their arms in something that looked decent.
Yeah.
But it just happened. As it happened, they spelled out NVUJ. And immediately people said, well, that means John is dead. And what that means is new vocalist, unknown John.
Oh, that's another one of those.
That was another one. Yeah. And that came out in 65. But I don't remember which one of them it was, but one of them said in an interview that they've all been dead one time or another. You know? So
I didn't know that one actually.
yeah.
The one with Rubber Soul
Mhm.
is interesting because Rubber Soul was, by the way, a big shift in the way they recorded songs and wrote them and stuff. But
Uh-huh.
what happened was that they took a picture
Mhm.
and they all looked at it and was like, yeah, but wouldn't it be cool if it had some sort of distortion to it? Oh no, so the guy took the picture, the photographer did,
Uh-huh.
and they put it on that viewer that they had back then,
Mhm.
so they could see the slides
Right.
on a bigger screen, but the slide kind of sort of folded, the sheet of the image folded a little bit, and it
Right.
elongated their face.
Okay.
And the Beatles said, yeah, that's what we want. And everybody that was there was like, yeah, but that ain't right. Yeah, we want it like that. And things like that,
Yeah.
little things like that, contributed to psychedelia, because
Oh
it
yeah.
came out, people see it, and they're like, oh, I want to do that. And then you start
Yeah.
seeing all these groovy. So a lot of things that the Beatles contributed to music that folks aren't necessarily aware of.
But that Abbey Road cover was probably, I mean, I remember, heck, I had one. Just about everybody had a poster of that cover up on the wall. It was just super, super iconic. So much so that in the, it was either the late 90s or the early to mid 2000s, over in the UK, there's a huge anti-smoking campaign going on over there still to this day. They went so far as to airbrush the cigarette out of Paul McCartney's hand.
On which album?
On Abbey Road. If you look at the old cover, he has a cigarette in his hand, pointing down. They airbrushed it out. On the new cover, you don't see that.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Just for the continuity of what it was. It's like having Clint Eastwood in one of his spaghetti westerns, and like he's sitting there with the cigar and the pistola, and they
and it's gone.
And it's gone. I mean, soon the pistola will be gone, and he'll be holding a snow cone. You know what I'm saying? He'll be holding like a little snow cone. So.
Well, we talk about the Beatles a lot, and I know we do, but we'll kind of let me kind of pull it out of there just a little bit here, because what I want to try to do from now on, and folks, I don't know, this is an experiment, so we're going to see. What I want to do once a week is try to come up with something that's just going to kind of blow Eloy's mind, and we'll see if it does it or not. This all started a few episodes back when we were talking about people making covers of music. And we were talking about that song by Harry Nilsson, Without You.
I Can't Live.
Yes, that one. And Mariah Carey did a cover of it. And I just absolutely blew you away when I said Harry Nilsson's version was a cover as well, that it was originally done by Badfinger. And you just went, no, ain't no way. And you had to look it up here live. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could do that again. So I'm going to kind of flash back to another episode where you and I had the discussion about Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a little Jimi Hendrix tidbit. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't.
Okay.
But it's basically a quote from Jimmy in an interview that was done in 1968. And he was asked, who do you look up to as a guitarist? Who do you think is a real good guitarist? And he said,
well, can I? Okay,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You know why? Because you want to know if I know it, but go ahead. Can you phrase it so that, and then I try to answer it?
Okay, well, he said that this guitarist, quote, is the best guitarist around. Do you know who he was talking about?
So he had he liked Eric Clapton a lot.
Hmm.
It's not Eric Clapton though.
No.
I know that I'm going to know it when you say it, which is funny.
I'm going to throw a few hints out. This guy had a band back then. He was 17 years old. And he toured with Jimi Hendrix.
Rory,
his first American tour.
Was it something Gallagher?
No. This guitarist left that band. The band was called the Moving Sidewalks.
Was it something? Go ahead.
That band broke up not long afterwards, like 1969, early 1969, and he got together and formed another band that he's still in 50 years later.
That he's still in to this day, 50 years later?
To this day, 50 years later. You've not heard of the first band, Moving Sidewalks. Everybody has heard of this other band. Everybody.
And the guy was from England?
No, he was not from England.
Where was he from?
The U.S.
Okay. I'm thinking Randy, California. I think that was the name, or I may get that name wrong. Remember that guy?
No, I don't, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. I think it was Randy. We'll check later. Or it was something to do with a state and the name, but and he's super famous. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's very famous.
Like I will know him.
You will know him.
Do I like his music?
I would be shocked if you didn't. I mean, I would be absolutely floored. I think you like him, yeah. Like as I said, they toured together through 1968. And in fact, he tells a story about let's see, I was 17 years old and on tour with Jimmy. Every night we would get into a motel and we would stay at the end of the hall. He would stay with his bedroom door open. He'd be in there listening to the first Jeff Beck album. And he asked me, how the heck does Jeff do all of this? To which I replied, believe me, Jeff is sitting in a room right now listening to your album, asking himself how the heck you do what you do.
Okay, so let's do something. I'm gonna shoot off what the crowd is talking, answering, and we've got Dave, Billy, what? That's Patrick's. Jeez, Patrick's. Stay on topic, man. Come on, even on the show. That's actually my fault, but I'm including him in the in the air. Peter Ham says Dave Gatton. Snow Crusher throws out Buddy Guy. And Snow Crusher has he's very enthused, so he's got Billy Gibbons, and he's got Texas. I don't know how to. And then Harju says Paco Lucia.
No.
They're all off.
Well, I can tell you one of them is right. One of them is absolutely correct.
So I'm going to go with Snow Crusher's Billy Gibbons.
Billy Gibbons is the right answer from ZZ Top. He was lead guitarist for a group called The Moving Sidewalks. He was 17. And they hung out, they toured. Moving Sidewalks opened up for Jimi Hendrix Experience on their first U.S. tour.
Well, I didn't know that. Daniel Harju says low, just throwing out names. Snow Crusher. The problem with Snow Crusher is that he was grabbing a bunch of rocks and throwing it at the window. He knows that one of those pebbles was gonna smash that window. But hey, he got it.
But he got it right. You said, where's he from? And I'm watching it pop up, and I'm trying not to comment or make anything like that. But yes, it was Billy Gibbons. He is from Texas.
Dave Gatton wanted to make sure that he wasn't included in the in this debacle. So he said Peter Ham was for the "Without You" song. He said,
but he's absolutely right. Peter Ham was. I can't remember if he wrote all of the lyrics or most of the lyrics, but he wrote the music.
Yeah,
and at least some of the lyrics to that song. Peter Ham was an excellent performer too, and he doesn't get enough credit for some of the work he did. They're best known for some of their tunes. Badfinger, we're talking about. They're best known for some of their tunes that happened during that stage where everybody was kind of trying to copy and sound like the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
But Peter Ham was an excellent guitarist and excellent performer. I mean, that was a kicking group. But okay, so it didn't blow your mind, but it's, you know, I really dig on little things like that. Who would have ever thought that Jimi Hendrix and Billy Gibbons not only shared a stage but toured together?
Yeah, I didn't know that. That is pretty amazing.
Before they created ZZ Top and went on to other things.
Well, I mean, heck, it's a good story he can always tell, because Jimi Hendrix, if you can pull that out of your hat.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, one time, Jimi Hendrix and I, and by the way, Jimi Hendrix was like 27 when he passed away. So he's talking about basically a kid, you know.
Uh-huh. And if you can go on Google and you can look it up, you know, Billy Gibbons and Jimi Hendrix, and there's a photo there on this one particular page of everybody in the moving sidewalks standing there with Jimi Hendrix, and Billy Gibbons is standing right next to him. And he had the little peach fuzzy beard on. He was 17 years old. He had a little peach fuzzy beard. That's kind of fun.
I've got one for you that's not like a shock necessarily, but it's a little story within what we're talking about. So John Lennon was with Yoko Ono.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that. But at this point in the story that I'm about to tell you guys, and they were in New York and they were going to do a show. Frank Zappa was also in town.
Okay.
And Frank Zappa is quite the individual, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And if you ever look into Frank Zappa, for you folks out there, which you probably have, but his story is pretty, and his books are pretty cool. The biography, he's got one, and it's like you wouldn't expect the area and it's a great book. I forget the name of the book, but it's him growing up out in the desert, because that's where it's a strange mix of like desert landscape, 1950s desert landscape. Usually when you watch like movies or stuff of 50s, it's usually hometown America in a nice green, you know what I'm saying, environment. Well, his book opens up in the strangest of circumstances, in the middle of the desert where he grew up with that other somewhat famous musician from, boy, what was the name? They did Trout Mask Replica. He was a psychedelic kind of guy. He's still around, by the way. Look up the album Trout Mask Replica and the singer of that, where they both grew up together.
Okay.
And so anyhow, back to, I think, New York, Zappa's staying at a hotel room, and John Lennon wanted to meet Zappa, and along with Yoko.
Okay.
And Zappa had no idea. The managers set it up to really shock Zappa. So Zappa comes up, and Daniel Hart, Captain B. Yep. So
Captain Beefheart.
It was Captain Beefheart, and he died 2 years ago. So thanks for that, Harju. So the managers set it up, and they say, okay, we're gonna go to Frank Zappa's hotel room, and he's gonna flip when he sees John Lennon is at his door. And John Lennon knocks at his door. Frank Zappa gets up. He says, I don't know what, I was just smoking cigarettes on the couch watching TV. He gets up, walks over, opens the door, and it's John Lennon. And I don't remember the quote that John Lennon said, to Zappa, but it was meant to like sort of shock. And John Lennon said, "Oh, hey, how you doing? You want to stay standing there? You can come in if you like." He was very nonchalant about it.
Yeah.
Like he could give a hoot about, and so the manager's like, "Wait a sec, but it's John Lennon." He says, "Yeah, come in." And they sat down. Well, John asked them if he wanted to. It was either one of the two. Forgive me because I'm paraphrasing of what I remember. It was either going to be a Frank Zappa show, or no, it was a John Lennon show. So he said, "Would you like to join us on stage?" So they worked out a bit from one of Zappa's things, and they agreed that any songs that they worked together would be titled accordingly, right? So they went and did the show. They recorded. Zappa was up there and everything, and Zappa had named that song, and it was a Zappa song that they had worked out. And later the album comes out. Zappa tells the story later on, I think in the 80s, later 80s. And he said, all of a sudden, John Lennon album comes out. I think it was on sometime in New York or something. And he says, not only did John not give me credit, he took credit for writing the song, and he changed the name of the song. I wasn't very happy about that. And so he mentioned one of those little situations amongst musicians, and that kind of happened. So it's an interesting little insight into their world.
Zappa was definitely his own man. He was not impressed by celebrity. He was not impressed by celebrity at all, man.
And a lot of people don't realize he wasn't a druggie, let's say.
No.
He was totally against that. Although I think, well, he was definitely a smoker, and I don't know about alcohol. I don't think he did any of that. He was very, and yet he was super psychedelic. And the last thing I'll say about Zappa is, if you want to see his earliest video recording, he went on a show back in the 50s, maybe 60s, probably early, and he's a young kid. He looked awkward. And he shows up on this variety show, and he brings a bicycle with a set of, you've seen that one, yeah?
With the drumsticks, yes.
And he proceeds to use this to create a piece, a live sort of like hitting the sticks against the sides of the bike, and and so even at that age, he had to keep himself entertained living in the lonely desert, right? Yeah. So he had his particulars. So that would be an interesting look if you ever want to check out that video. I think that you'll find it interesting.
And he one-upped it a few years later when he appeared on the TV show The Monkees. And he, with a sledgehammer, and he played the car. He just basically beat the heck out of this old car. It was him and Mike Nesmith. Zappa did all the swinging, but Nesmith was there with him, just kind of, tapping his foot along and just having a good old time. It was just a little brief 2-minute thing.
Yeah. If you search Zappa on YouTube, particularly, there's a lot of interesting content that, in retrospect, back in the day, I don't think that I would have cared either way. I mean, I might have watched a little thing here and there. But looking at it historically, the things he was saying and stuff, he had a particular way about him. So very interesting.
Yeah, he was definitely his own man, always experimenting, always recording. I mean, the guy would just jump up out of bed at 2:30 in the morning, go down to the studio, grab a guitar, and put something down on tape that was driving him up a tree. And it may get used in something, it may never get used in anything, but he had to get it out of his head. And as far as I know, his family is still going through his recordings years after he passed, because he just had so many.
Yeah.
And I mean, recordings of gigs, concerts, studio stuff that never saw the light of day. I mean, they could create album upon album of tracks that he has just buried in his archive that never came out for one reason or another. Maybe he didn't think it was finished, or it wasn't polished enough, or he just didn't like it. He was the final judge on what of his got released.
Yeah. Just like Prince.
Yeah.
He's got volumes of unreleased, they say unreleased recordings. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, he does. And I don't know, a lot of that stuff, I think sometimes that their wishes should be respected, in that if they didn't want it released, it shouldn't be. But other things I think maybe should be. Some of these old sessions, especially concerts or gigs or what have you, I'd love to hear them.
in the early 90s, there was this big opening up of the Jimi Hendrix vaults. Throughout the 80s and into the 90s, incidentally. But in the 90s, the estate was granted, I think the story was that they were fighting it and it was in legal issues. And eventually, so they proceeded to put out a bunch of different new material that Jimi Hendrix had recorded but not finished. And in many cases, they brought in musicians to actually finish these songs. So fans are treated to songs that are not that are finished after the fact, and it's not necessarily his best stuff, but it is an insight, and it's good that it's there. They came out with a Jimi Hendrix Blues album, which I thought was fantastic. A lot of Jimi Hendrix spent a lot of time, or at least a session with his band on the BBC radio, recording live his tracks. They're subpar. The quality is high as far as the crispiness of the recording, but it's unpolished, and it is what it is. It was a live recording, so you have a lot of that stuff out there available now that you didn't have access to all throughout the 70s, 60s, which is exciting stuff. So as far as I think it's good that they release it, but most people, I like the fact that we can dig deeper into these, these characters from, years gone by, and explore, out of a curiosity and respect,
Yeah. Yeah. And, there comes there's a little bit of a judgment call involved there as well, in that, what did they want to keep private? I mean, because these are just people. We put them up on a pedestal, and yeah, they have a lot of celebrity, but there's got to be something there, personal and private.
You're
And
right.
if they didn't want it out, I think that wish should be respected. But then again, there are other things that, as you say, that Jimmy didn't finish, that they brought in other musicians to kind of finish up and polish up or something like that. But you also, if you look at something like the Beatles song "Free as a Bird,"
That's a good example, actually. Yeah.
that was a cassette that was found in Yoko found this cassette in their recorder of John on the piano. And she got a hold of George, Paul, and Ringo and got them all together, and they cleaned it up and cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it, because it was a very crappy recording. And they released it. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember when they released it.
That was in the early. That was in either. That was like the early 2000s.
I want to say,
or early 90s or 90s.
Oh man, I gotta look it up here.
The interesting thing about what you're saying there, that's a great example of
95.
95. Okay, so I bought that, to be honest with you, because they came out, and it's expensive because they had double. These were 2 set CDs or more, and you had part 1, part 2, and whatever. And I started buying them, and man, I was glued to them so bad, because they had tracks of the Beatles without the accompanying extra sounds. So you had John Lennon playing frickin' what is it? Mother Superior jumped the gun.
Yeah.
Happiness is a Warm Gun.
Happiness is a Warm Gun, yeah.
Just on acoustic, it doesn't sound. It sounds like the song eventually, but it doesn't, because it's just him on acoustic figuring out the song. That's priceless for a guitarist to listen to.
Right.
It's priceless. It's priceless to listen to. And I was blown away. I was blown away when I heard that, dude. It was amazing. So, boy, why were we saying that? There was a reason. Oh, because of Free as a Bird.
Because of Free as a Bird, where basically what it was okay, it was originally recorded in 1977. 77 by John Lennon.
No, what?
Free as a Bird.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it was just him sitting there on a piano recording it on their cassette deck.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, in 1995, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr asked Yoko for any unreleased stuff that she had hanging around there that she thought John might like re-released, that they were going to get together and collaborate one more time for an anthology album.
Thank goodness they did.
And they got Free as a Bird and another one called Real Love.
Mm-hmm. Which they had used in one of John Lennon's documentaries from the 80s before. I don't know if you remember that VHS cassette of Imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I watched that, dude, so much. That Imagine cassette, or VHS, so much, dude. It was just from beginning to end.
Well, they
awesome.
Actually took that song Free as a Bird and they made an album of it itself. It was a small album. It wasn't a full 33, but they used the original recording, the original 1977 recording, is one track, and then one cleaned up version, and then another cleaned up version with some guitar and bass, and then another cleaned up version, and finally the last version of the whole thing is the one that was released to the public and put on the anthology album. So it's actually kind of cool to be able to listen to the processing they did to it. And if you listen, all of the vocals done on it kind of have a wah, 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 kind of a quality to it.
Yeah, because it was just an old recording.
It was just an old, nasty recording, but they did that with all of the instruments when they mixed it, and then kind of evened it out and smoothed it out. So you have John's vocals with that kind of a waver that was because it was on a cassette.
Yeah. Which actually matched Beatles like anyhow.
Yes, it did. The instruments are nice and clear, but all of the vocals kind of have that wavering quality to it.
Yeah,
which kind of, it was
nobody
engineering.
Excellent
engineering.
It was totally freaking awesome, but nobody would do that other than them. I can't say nobody, but for the sake of what we're talking about, honestly, to decide to put up front messed up, screwed up vocals like that, which by the way are awesome, but anybody listening would say we can't do anything with this, and they created such a awesome track. It's like that's some heavy duty stuff. A lot of people were offended with it. I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, I loved it too, man. Well, you got to figure though, these people are professionals. And that's why professionals have jobs. They can take something like that and make it excellent.
Yeah.
You know, guys like you and me who are sitting here hacking around at home on a computer, we might be able to do something a little bit with it, but not really going to be able to run it through the specialized equipment and software that they have. You know, I mean, unless you're sitting on a 64 track theatrical mixer and I don't know about it, you know.
Well, to me, it's more to do, not that it can't be done if you do mixing and recording. It's the fact of even deciding to accept it as possible or even worthy of release preemptively before you even do any of the work on it, saying we're going to turn this mess of a cassette into a beautiful, and they did it, man. They did it right.
Yeah.
On the flip side, just since we're talking kind of roundabout Beatles stuff, another thing you should check out on the internet if you've not done so, on YouTube is John Lennon and Yoko Oko.
Yoko Oko?
I did one of your and Yoko Ono. Yoko. um, they joined Chuck Berry
Mhm.
back sometime in the early 70s, mid 70s for a jam.
Mhm.
And you have these videos on YouTube, and you got to check it out because when they join them, and you have Chuck Berry, that lanky tall guy, and
Mhm.
John there, they're singing, long distance information, and they're singing his songs. Well, Chuck Berry had no idea, and it's captured on film, and you got to see this if you can look it up. But Chuck Berry is singing into the microphone. Lennon is also close to the microphone. They're singing. It sounds beautiful. It sounds rock and roll. It's awesome. And Yoko's back there, and she's hitting on a drum. So Chuck Berry's okay with that because, okay, she's on the drum. And then she goes, in the middle of long distance information, dude. In the middle of long distance information, dude. In the middle, it's like when you have to see this video because Chuck Berry.
I'm gonna have to look for it.
You have to look at Chuck's face because Chuck does this like contortion with his face. Like as a musician, he was like, press stop on the record button, Bob.
Chuck Berry, excellent guitarist, fabulous performer, Mr. Rock and Roll, one of the inventors, all right, was not a nice man. He was not a nice man. There used to be a video on YouTube. I think it got pulled down because I haven't been able to find it, and I've been looking for it for over a year. It was a behind the scenes thing. Somebody had a camera rolling. It was Chuck Berry and Keith Richards. And they were going to play, I want to say it was Johnny B. Good. It was either Johnny B. Good or it was Maybelline, one of the two. And Chuck Berry would just get going in it, and Keith Richards would join in, and Chuck Berry would stop everything and just start cussing him up one side and down the other. No, you stupid SOB, you come in here and it sounds like this and you do this. Try it again. And I mean, he did everything but punch him. But I mean, and it got to the point to where Keith Richards was just laughing about it because it's like, let's see how much we can get this guy to go off. It was pretty funny. Now, I have not been able to find it in, like I said, a little over a year. So I don't know if it got pulled down or what, but it was hilarious to watch. Kind of cringy, but hilarious by its own right. But he was not a nice man. He was not a nice man at all.
I do want to say that along with Chuck Berry, a kind of an unsung hero was his bass player. I believe he'd use the upright bass.
Yeah.
Does anybody out there know the name of that bass player? I believe the last name was Cox.
I'm sure.
And he co-wrote and all that good stuff with Berry at times. Yeah. So he's another guy that was, of that time. And I don't know that he has the recognition nowadays, let's say.
Now, we kind of got on to the subject kind of peripherally about collaborations, talking about Chuck Berry and John Lennon and then John Lennon and Frank Zappa and what have you. I don't think I've ever asked you what about your attitude on supergroups. Where you take, you have, like, for instance, in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a supergroup that formed for just a little while called Damn Yankees.
I remember them.
Ted Nugent, I believe it was Tommy Shaw. Was it Dennis DeYoung? I'm going to show my ignorance here. It was either Dennis DeYoung or Tommy Shaw from Styx. Anyway, a whole bunch of them got together. And you had that supergroup. Then you also had the traveling Wilburys. Now, the traveling Wilburys, to me, were just absolutely kicking. I absolutely loved it. Everything that they did. I mean, when you've got George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, Roy Orbison. I don't think you can go wrong
Yeah.
myself. But I don't think we've ever talked about that.
There's a couple of things with that. So the problem with supergroups is that there's a lot of it's kind of like too many chefs in the kitchen. That doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a rule of thumb that would cause problems, but it, and I'm not talking about personality problems, I'm talking about musically, because you have the situation where, so typically a band like the Beatles, although we think of them as all super powerfully creative, and they were, you had roles that people set themselves into, and others agreed to silently, subconsciously throughout their history, and they functioned as a unit with everybody in their sort of seat. You get people from supergroups gathering together, um, everybody's got a lot to contribute, and all of a sudden, um, it could happen that you'll have a killer song or two or three because they're focused, but a lot of the members of that super group could have a situation where, like, well, I don't want to be imposing, so they don't give all that they got because they don't want to overtake, and then some others go for the ego. Well, no, yeah,
Right.
we got to do this, and so between that, it could create a less than lusterful um, production, or actual song in itself. The production can be awesome, but so I think that's one of the problems with supergroups. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. And that may be why they're so short lived. And I just had to look it up. It was Tommy Shaw from Styx. It was Tommy Shaw, Jack Blades from Night Ranger, Ted Nugent, and Michael Cardelloni. And that may be why some of these groups are so short lived, is you have that fight of egos.
yeah,
But I think the whole thing with the traveling Wilburys, they may have been the exception to the rule, because all of them were, I mean, the big mover and shaker behind them was Tom Petty. He wanted to put it together. Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne were fairly decent friends, and got a hold of George Harrison. Kind of, Jeff Lynne got a hold of George Harrison, and they just kind of put it all together. And getting Roy Orbison to join along, and they recorded 2 albums. And I don't remember if Roy Orbison was on the second album or not. He may have been on 1 or 2 cuts, but I know Roy Orbison was in one of the music videos from the first album, and then he passed away before they recorded the second video from the first album.
yeah.
So in his place, they all traded back and forth lines of the various verses. And in the Handle with Care,
Yeah.
Doc Hildebrandt jumped in Handle with Care. When it came to the section where Roy Orbison was singing, they had a empty rocking chair with a guitar sitting in it, and it was kind of rocking back and forth. And on his lines, they kind of panned over to a photo of Roy Orbison in a frame, sitting on a table. So it's kind of acknowledging him, keeping him alive in the band and what have you. But he passed away before they could shoot that video. But I don't remember if he was on the second album or not. But you talk about a conflict of egos. There wasn't one. Each of them took on a role. They started playing the persona of the Wilburys. They all had nicknames. Bob Dylan was Boo Wilbury. And you had they all took on a persona, and they played within that persona. And they passed around the vocals, they passed around the guitars, leads, and did harmonies together and everything. To me, they were an excellent group.
Yeah.
And
It was a successful endeavor.
yeah, it was a successful venture. And just me talking here, I'd like to see more collaborations like that. I mean, you see people get together and they jam with other people, and you see that a lot in blues. Bonnie Raitt will get up with Buddy Guy or something like that. But I'd like to see a lot more of that. It just, I mean, pick 5 artists that you'd like to see perform together. I'd love to see some collaborations.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I wasn't asking you to pick 5, but just in your brain, I mean, geez, who would you like to see perform together? Obviously living and still performing, but
yeah. Well, I know who I can tell you who I wouldn't want to see performing together.
Mm-hmm.
Mick Jagger and David Bowie, because I wouldn't want to see Mick Jagger and David Bowie performing dancing in the streets. Actually, you want to know the truth? I would like to see that, because that was damn funny, dude.
Oh, you're talking about that one video where somebody pulled the music out. They took the music video, pulled the music out, and then just kind of put their own sound effects in there.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about a cringy video? Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah, that was cringy. If you guys have not seen that, see, there's a lot of that on this episode here. But if you've not seen Mick Jagger, David Bowie performing dancing in the streets with all the music, brought down to zero, and just them doing the sort of articulations that they would have done when they were filming it. Because you know how it goes, right? They film music videos and you're miming to what you're listening. They'll have like a cassette recorder out there or some nice, and then they'll just mime what they're listening to, but they're not actually, obviously, they're lip syncing. And the funny thing about it is that this guy was a brilliant guy. He should win an award, because he took out all the music and then he overdubbed all the little sort of like Mick Jagger going and all that kind of stuff. And it was good.
Then you hear footsteps, and they'll go into one room and you hear the door creak open, stuff like that. It's actually some funny stuff.
But to be honest, even with the music, it's still cringy.
Yeah, it is. It's very cringy, but it is funny. It's good for comic relief. Oh man. Oh, Jim. No, I don't think we can do that. Jim Dockrell. I don't know, man. That's kind of it for me. Those were the only things that I had on my plate.
Well, fair enough. We did good, man. I mean,
well, we've only been up for, we haven't been up for an hour yet, so it would be a short episode if we cut it now. But what have you got? I'm sure you got something else.
Oh, well, not really, to be honest with you.
No? Okay. Well,
I mean,
cut it short, we can.
No, what I've got would take us into a different world altogether. And what's the use of that? I mean, because it has to do with other videos on YouTube. Oh, you're thinking?
No, I'm looking over here at the chat. I'm following the inside chat over here. For those of you who listening on the podcast and don't know, we record these in a YouTube live stream. So we have a live chat going on, and some of our friends come along and they cheer us on, from the bleachers, as it were. And Doc Jared Hildebrand just threw in big animals. Every time we have had Doc as a guest on the podcast, doesn't matter what we start out talking about, we end up talking about big animals. It's like a trip to the zoo. Somebody's going to talk about a wolf. Somebody's going to talk about big cats or something like that. So Doc has to throw that in. That's fun.
Well, I'll tell you, let me see if I can find this here. So we have a website, and it's called Trampled Underfoot Podcast.com. We have all of our past episodes right where that button that says Wayback Machine is at, and you click that and you can catch older episodes, and we have the new episodes coming out each week on Tuesdays, so you could listen to our podcasts. A little bit about us. So we have I don't know if you guys have gone and seen it, but we have an about us on the website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com website. And Mark, he says, Mark Lindsay is the old man of the pair. He's traveled Western Europe, lived in 14 states, and has visited 25 others. Born in 1961, he has a lot to get off of my lawn about. He's a major fan of classic comedy, blues guitar, and just plain being nice to one another. Okay, so you should check that out. And any comments?
Yeah, I also like puppies and long walks on the beach.
On mine, I say Eloy Escagedo grew a beard so folks would leave him alone. Lives with his dog and is the younger half of this most excellent podcast. He's of the 80s, plays and writes music, and enjoys a good bowl of clam chowder under the hot Florida sun. I'm quoted saying, I can always go back and rewrite this, but this is the truth of the matter. So you should check out our website and the things that we post there. We also have a Facebook page called Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. And you can catch our podcast where exactly, Mark?
Oh, all over the place. Our flagship, however, is Spreaker, but we're on your Apple Podcasts, we're on your Google Podcasts, we're on Stitcher, we're on iHeartRadio. We're so many places. Even if you're not listening to us, our voices are traveling through you like a convenience store burrito.
All right. And well, I think that we will leave it at that. We'll say hello to Tracy because she just popped in. And Tracy, good night, and good night to all of you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. This was a fun episode, actually.
It was a very fun episode. I would like to mention one thing that we didn't mention when we were talking about our excellent website. And that is it's sponsored by Steve Nealon.
Holy
over at Harneal Media, Webmaster to the Stars. If you're thinking about getting a hold of a website, kind of thinking about it, talk to Steve. He will hook you up.
Yeah, that's right. Steve Nealon, thank you again. We should have him on the pod. We should have everyone on the podcast. You know what? We're going to start taking down your names because we need to do some chit chatting. So
yeah,
we'll catch you guys next time. Are we good to go, Mark?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Did I do that? Says Mark.
Yeah, he did that. He didn't know it, but he did it. Thank you much, everybody. Thanks very much for hanging with us. Have a good evening.
Push the button, Frank.
Yep, push the button, Frank.